Okay, got it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Chicago IANDS. Wow, this has been a morning. I mean, we've had some interesting times, but this has been one of the worst. I have to say, and that we have an audience, and we can go the people who didn't get. I don't know what happened. I've been having trouble with my internet all month, and somehow or another, when I sent it, there was something happened to the link, and I don't know what, but I've got to unravel it before next month or I'll lose my mind. This was crazy, crazy. So, if you know anybody who tried to get on and didn't make it, they should be able to watch this online once Vicky gets back in town and can put it on. It's been crazy. As most of you know, we usually start our meeting with a brief meditation, so we're going to do that now. So if you have things on your lap or whatever, you might want to put them to the side and get yourself in a relaxed position and allow yourself to um, relax and go where you go when you go.
You have received the Spirit Repair Package, etheric spiritual bodies, carried out by the Master Angels of Spiritual Healer, Master John Douglas. Be aware of your body. To the Supreme God, to my spiritual teacher, to the Holy Masters.
Please mute yourself if you're not muted. Thank you. We have some people having trouble getting on. Excuse me just a minute. Hello? Hello? Beatrice? Yes. Yes. It's a mistake. We've got a big problem this morning. The way to get in is, uh, James, it's to go to zoom.com and Zoom, ZOOM dot. Okay, when you get there, You can use what is it, James, that you use? The meeting ID and the password.
The passcode. I can put that in the chat. Give me a second.
She's going to put it, he's going to put it in the chat. Well, she's not on yet, so she can't use that. Go to the zoom.com and
Yes, I know. I know I know the meeting ID and the password. I have it on your webpage.
yes,
On the email. On the email.
yes, right. So use those and use zoom.com to get in. Uh, 34 people have done that so far, so you should be able to do it. Or I sent another email after that one, just about a half an hour ago or an hour ago, and it's the old one. It's one from last month. You can use last month's to get in too.
Last month I wasn't here. I was out of the country.
I know, but I sent it. I sent it again
I sent it again.
about an hour ago. Look at your email from about an hour ago. That should work. I need to I Okay, well I need to go because the meeting has started.
Okay, okay.
Okay. I'm sorry. Thank you. Bye. What a comedy of errors this has been. I'll tell you, it's been weird, strange things going on in the world. They say there's all kinds of weird things going on in the heavens. So I guess we're
Those
just
facts.
being part of it. So
Those-
um, uh, I'm so glad that today we have Thomas with us. Uh, you spoke for us a long time ago.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah.
Thomas.
Oh gosh, I think maybe 3 times in the past over the years. I think it goes all the way back to 2005.
Yeah, been a long time.
Mhm.
And he and I have had some interesting experiences.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm sure you're going to enjoy this. We're just going to um, talk about next month at the end. So I'm going to turn it over to Thomas and let him tell you all about himself and what happened to him and
Yeah, yeah.
what he's doing now.
Yeah, well, thanks for, having me back. I know it has been a while, and I've always enjoyed, well, I used to do this in person in Chicago over in Evanston, and it was really nice being able to be with people and just share. My whole reason for doing this is I was telling Diane and friends a little bit earlier, is right now the world needs more coherence. Obviously, if we look around, there's the appearance of chaos, and but each individual, if we each contribute some coherence, it's very powerful. In fact, coherence is way more powerful than chaos. So it doesn't take that much. But we all need to do things that can help cultivate that ability to be in the presence of coherence. And we will have a much greater influence in the world. And the things that we'd like to see changed, instead of trying to tear it apart each problem by problem, if we can just bring in more coherence, we'll begin to see things unfold in a way that much more less, it takes less effort, it's more effortless. Um, and then also it enhances our creativity, our ability to more easily solve these problems that we have in the world. So it's not from working the outside in, it's the inside out. That's always been my philosophy about everything. It all starts inside, has come out. So anyway, that's kind of my philosophy of things. But so Diane was telling me before, when I asked her how would you like me to present things, and she said that she'd like to hear about what my life was like before I had the NDE, and then go from there. So briefly, I'm a little nature boy. I grew up out in the country, and you had to tell me to be home for dinner, be home before dark, and get my homework done and get my chores done. After that, man, I lived in the woods. I had the big tree house, and I practically lived out there. So I spent a lot of time with Mother Nature. And even though when you're a child, you don't, you might understand things not intellectually, but kind of on a spiritual level. And you didn't talk about it because you didn't think there was any reason to talk about it. You wouldn't know how to talk about it anyway. You just experience. So I'd be out there and I noticed certain things that there's a coherence there's something underlying that gives rise and sustains and supports all the creation around me. Now I can put it into words, but back then, no, I just understood that. Um, so the seasons would come and go, and you would see things continuing to evolve and shift and change. But there was always something, I had a sense there's always something underneath that. Didn't know what it was. Now I went to Catholic school, and so everybody would say, well, that's God underneath, and of course I didn't really totally understand much of that either. I like to say, and if there are any Catholics here and you went to Catholic school, you know what I mean. There's certain things about that, and I have a joke that's kind of like, well, it's like a vaccination for me. It didn't take, but what did take, and always has been a part of my life, is that spiritual aspect. To me, that's was my teacher. When I was in the woods, that was my teacher, my mentor. And so I always fell back on that when I was evaluating reality around me. That was more truthful to me than almost anything anybody could say to me. And in fact, one of the things that I remember, the most profound thing anybody ever said about, God was when I was a little child. They said, "Well, God's in everything. He's in the trees. He's in the grass, in the animals, this and that." That made so much sense to me because as a child, that's what I was seeing. I knew there was something underneath all of this. It permeated it. Well, anyway, so as time went on, early on, I started learning how to play drums. When I was 9 years old, I started playing professionally when I was 12, and have done that all my life as well. But at some point, I moved to the city when I was about 20 years old, and what I saw there was a little bit different than what I'd grown up in the country. It was much more complex. There was a lot going on. I lived in Fort Worth during a time when there was a lot of strife, a lot of drug dealing going on then, and racial uh, violence. It was just a pretty crazy time. And here's this little country boy, like in the middle of all this, and it could be overpowering, overshadowing. And so one time I had an experience out in the woods uh, with some friends. I took them back to where I grew up as a child because they didn't know much about country and I didn't know much about the city, but there we were. So I said, well, come on out. And I had this serendipitous experience where somehow I settled back into that really quiet, still place. And my perception allowed me to begin to perceive very, very subtle aspects that I hadn't really seen before. And that's like, as I looked at a tree, then I would begin to see a little more, like under through the bark. I began to perceive subtle aspects of everything around me, coming down also almost to a cellular level. So this was really fascinating. It wasn't one of those things like, oh my gosh, look at that. It was just very natural, very easy. And I was just with that. And that perception continued for a while. And then after a while, it just began to fade out. And then I was back to originally what I thought was normal. But then I realized, oh, there's more than just that. That's normal, but this is really normal. So um, I knew like I wanted to have that experience more, but I didn't know how. And I saw all the people that were doing the drugs and stuff, and I knew that wasn't going to be the way. And so I started seeking, I started searching, and I looked around, and there were all kinds of different avenues you could go. Didn't seem like growing up in the Catholic Church, I'd kind of stepped aside for a while there. But there were, what was there? There was a group who oh, the guys that have the beautiful books of all the Indian uh, gods and things, and they dress like that, and they just look so happy all the time. Um, anyway, so I thought, well, they look really happy. Let me check it out. So I'm over there and kind of hanging out with them a little bit. And then I realized, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's it. So I kept seeking, I kept looking. And after a while, because of all the violence and things that was going on around, I started slipping into some depression. And I got more isolated because I decided, after that experience in the woods, I was going to seek this out. I wanted answers. I wanted to know, what is this? Can't we have that experience all the time? And my problem was I didn't know how. So, but I was looking in hopes of finding that. And so I got deeper and deeper into the state of depression. I got more isolated, and my friends didn't understand what was going on. And I didn't really know what was going on so much, except that I had to find some answers. So something happened that there was a big a riot that happened at a venue where I was playing. It was very serious. And it ended up that a police officer out in the parking lot got shot and killed. And all this stuff, then it's just the weight of it was so much that I just couldn't take it anymore. I just had, I got to get out of here. So my parents lived at a lake in Texas, really nice, away from any of that stuff, that I was dealing with. So they said, yeah, come on up. And so I went up and I was looking for a job, and I found a job somewhere. And but I had been getting sick for a little while and didn't know what was going on. I thought I had a virus or something that just couldn't kick. I'd get really sick for a couple of days, then I'd feel better, and then a few days later I'd be really sick as a dog again. And this was happening for a while. So something was happening, but I just didn't know what. So while I was there, all of a sudden, I was actually in the shower, and I collapsed in pain, in abdominal, and yelled out to my dad, and he wrapped me up in a blanket and raced us off to the hospital. Get in the hospital, and they say, okay, apparently you have acute appendicitis. So no big deal. We're going to go in there. We'll take care of that. It hadn't ruptured yet, but it was probably getting close. So they said, don't worry about it. All goes well. You'll be out in like 2 or 3 days. Okay, I trusted. So we go in, and when I come out of surgery, and my first moments of consciousness as I came out from the the drug-induced state that they could operate, I was in the most intense pain I'd ever experienced in my entire life, and I was like a wounded animal, and they had tubes and all kinds of things hooked up to me, and I was trying to pull things out and do all kinds of, so it took about 5 different nurses to hold me down, and they gave me a shot to put me into kind of a dead zone. Like when you first go, I don't know if you've had surgery, but when you go in and they give you the medication, anesthesia, and you go down, and it's like they pull the floor out from under you. There's nothing. It was just a black hole, essentially. So that's what I came out of. But then when I came out, it was a whole different ballgame. Apparently, things did not go well as they thought it would. So it turns out what happened was they got in, and yes, the appendix was, they needed to remove that, but they found a lot of other inflammation going on or all around there, and they knew something else was going on. And so they had to do exploratory surgery, which was about 9 or 10 hours long. Mine will show up in a minute, my couch. um, so so that was a very long exploratory surgery, and then they found what was causing me to really be sick and triggered the appendix. Actually, thank goodness I had one. Was a large tumor in my colon around the transverse. So they had to remove that and portions of the colon. So what they did is they were able to do that, and then they somehow connected it back together, so I didn't have to have an appliance or anything like that. But it was because of the nature of it. It was a contaminated procedure that they had not expected. And so they had to flood me with antibiotics to try to prevent infection. Because if I got sepsis, it could threaten my life. They were concerned about that. And their concerns were valid, because that's what happened. After a few days, I kept getting weaker and weaker there in the hospital. And then they finally, my fever kept going up and they couldn't control it. Had to put the ice packs all around me and things. And I was in and out of consciousness. Like sometimes I just wasn't there. I was kind of somewhere else. I got visited sometimes by past family members that, some of them, I mean, obviously I didn't know them, but they're probably generations ahead of me, but they were part of our lineage, I guess. And then that would fade out, and then I would be dealing with the pain and everything. They'd come and give me another injection and knock me out. This went on for a few days, and but by the time it got really, really bad, um, I heard someone walk into the room at one point, and my father was sitting in a chair across from me, and they said, "We're sorry. We've done everything we can. We're not sure he's going to make it." Well, I looked unconscious to them, but I heard everything they said. And I'm sitting here going like, whoa, 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 hang on. I think you're in the wrong room, man. I'm too young to die. I'm 22. I can't die. Are you kidding me? Uh, and then they walked out. I guess to leave him the thoughts, and it wasn't like there's anything they could do at that moment anyway. So, and I kept thinking, there's no way. I made that statement to myself out loud. But then within a matter of moments, this process began. And what happened was there was a sheet covering me up to, up to my shoulders about. And I started getting a sensation down in my feet, a little tingly sensation. And so I happened to look down there, and wherever the sheet was covering that sensation, I could see through it. I could see through the sheet, and I saw what was underneath there. And it was like as this moved up, it kept moving up my legs slowly, very gradual process. I was very fascinated by this. And all the pain actually had come to a screeching halt when this started. And it was moving up my legs slowly, and it looked like an empty shell of air. Have you ever seen a cicada that's molted and he's kind of stuck on the tree and it's just an empty shell of the cicada? That's what I was seeing. That's what I looked like down underneath that sheet as it moved up my legs. Kept moving up, and finally it got up. When it got up to around my heart area, my chest there, I that's when I realized, oh, well, I guess I am dying. And in that moment, I had a choice, either to panic and fight to stay in this body, or just simply let go. What's that saying? Let go and let God, whatever. I chose the latter because the alternative to me would have meant I'd go back into all that pain, and I was just done with it. I couldn't take it anymore. So I let go, and it continued on up. And then as it rose, at some point, right back here at the back of the crown of the head, the little pinpoint area, I literally popped out of my body. And I was looking down, I saw my body there. And at first, my reaction was like, what's that? And then I realized, hey, that's me. But wait, how can that be me? I'm up here looking down at that. And that's why I like to tell people, if that's as far as I had gone and then instantly returned back to the body, that would have been worth the price of admission. you know, like, yeah. Um, because what it showed me was like, we are more than just this body. This is a space that we occupy, but there's something more about us than just being here in this body. And I had concepts of the soul and all that because of school and everything, and church and all whatnot. But I didn't really understand it so much. But in that moment, there was some sense of peace that came over me that I didn't fear. I didn't have any panic at all. And but then I kept moving. I began to move forward, further away from the view of that body. And as I came up, it was like, little doll houses where they don't have a roof on it. You can look inside and see all the little rooms and stuff. I was experiencing that. I could see the room next to me and all this stuff. I could see this, but I kept moving further away from that. And then after a bit, I lost interest in any of this totally. It was like it began to fade out, and I kept moving. And as I moved, I was, at some point, I ended up in, this tunnel. but it wasn't a harsh edge tunnel like that. It was like almost gauze-like, very where you could almost see through it, but it had a subtle boundary to it. And as I moved into it, deeper into it, it kept expanding, but so did I. So like my perception, there was no sound, total silence, like no silence we've ever known here. And but I kept, it was like molecules, like a gas molecule begins to expand and fills up the space it's in. That's what was happening to me. Now, one point I would say here is that when this happened, it was before there were books on near-death experience. I'd never heard of that experience before. And I think Moody came out, his book came out right about when this was happening. So I didn't know anything about this. So I had no point of reference to say, oh, I'm having one of these experiences. I didn't know what to expect or anything. I just let go. Only later, years later, did somebody tell me, oh, you had a near-death experience. I said, a what? A buddy of mine, he went through the death process as well, experienced that process. And he said, yeah, ain't no near about it. When you go through the death process, you're going through the death process. It's just the main thing, the reason we call it near is because we made it back. But so I got to witness what that's like. So anyway, back to the story. And I don't know, Diane, if somebody has a question at any point, that they're saying, well, did this happen? Feel free to, let me know.
You can put any questions on the chat, in the chat box.
That people have. Oh, you're telling people. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, so if this triggers some question that you really, feel like you want to know, be sure and put it in the chat box and Diane will let me know. So back to that. So I'm moving and expanding. And then at some point, I saw all these, like, they look like almost quartz crystal, but had a like soft bluish white glow to them. And there were columns and columns of these, and some were moving downward and some were moving upward. And it was gorgeous, beautiful, vast. I don't know how many, it could have, hundreds of thousands or whatever. And I didn't know what it was at first, but then at a certain point, I realized, oh, I think these are souls, and I'm one of these. I just happened to be moving upward. They were moving in the direction of the relative existence that we're used to, the bodies. They were souls that were on their way to occupying a human form, beginning another part of their journey. So my journey was, I didn't know where it was going, but I just was moving. And then that began to fade out. And then I kind of emerged from that tunnel. Vast, huge, almost infinite space. It was dark. It was almost black. There was nothing really to see at that point, but it wasn't frightening ever. But then I was greeted by some beings. There were 5 of them, 3 in the back, 2 in the front, almost like, like one of those choir stands where the people in the back are a little bit taller and the ones in front a little bit shorter. And they were sort of a luminescent. Children say, oh, those are angels. I said, well, okay, maybe they were. I didn't see any wings. So I'll tell you more about that later. But it was quiet. They communicated with me. Mouths didn't move. But they were clearly communicating with me. And I'll never forget how I felt and what they said. They said, don't worry, everything's all right. We're here to help you. We love you. And they kept repeating that communication to me. And you know how, if you've ever experienced love in your life, which I hope everybody has, and maybe is presently, but that kind of love that I just experienced in those moments was like unlike any other love I'd ever experienced in my life. Totally unbounded love, just simple. And that was so soothing to me. And then another being, I felt the presence of another being. And then I turned my head and, just like right here, here's this face. I recognized that person because I had just 10 days before this all happened to me in the surgery and everything, I had learned a meditation technique. And the person that I was seeing there was a long ago deceased master, guru, whatever, who brought the particular meditation into Western world for families instead of just for monks and people like that. And I had had a wonderful experience that that inspired me so much because of that depression I had gone through before. When I learned that technique, I had that experience of unboundedness again. And then I know, oh, I think this is what I've been searching for. I was looking for this experience and how I could cultivate it again in my life. So I was very positive. And then, of course, then the situation happened where, oh, well, next thing I know, I'm in the hospital dying. Um, but but that's who that was. And I didn't know anything about him really. I'd only been meditating 10 days. I didn't know much in any tradition about it at all. He didn't speak. He just gazed at me. And then he did something somehow that in those moments, my past got erased. It disappeared. I had no past. And then I had no future either. In that moment, all I had was the moment, purely the present moment. That's all that existed. In reality, that's really all that exists anyway. That's underneath everything. But anyway, I didn't know any of that. I never thought of that. But there I was. So there was nothing to look back at. Like I had, and I realized why it happened that way, because he wanted me to continue this journey unencumbered by any attachment to any experience or previous thoughts, philosophies, beliefs, anything. I had none of that. All I had was here's what is in this moment. So it couldn't become attached. Every time I had an experience, I began to move forward. And every time I would have an experience, as wonderful as it might have been, as soon as it was done, well, now it's gone and there was no file. So I couldn't look back and go, oh, wow, that was really nice. I wish I could have that. Can I go back and get that? No, I was just like, next one here, moment by moment. And that's what kept me moving deeper and deeper into this vast field. Um, so that's where I was. And then the next thing I know, I notice a light. And we've heard about, the light, going into the light and all that. I mean, I didn't know about that back then, but that happened. And at first it was a white kind of light off in the distance, but I was moving towards it. It had a magnetic quality to it. I was being drawn to it. And as I got closer, it began to change to more of a golden color, soft gold, but brilliant. And then I got closer and closer. And as I did, I felt just before I went into it, and just before there was this exhilaration of like, poof, then I'm in it. But as I experienced it, wasn't like looking at something at gold. It was, I became that as well. So I was like a molecule of this vast, beautiful, soft area like gold. And that's all I could experience in that moment. And by the way, the reason I'm able to share this with you, even though my memory got erased at that time, once I'll tell you in a minute about how when I got back to the body, the only memory I had when I returned to the body was the journey. Everything intact in the chronological order of it, everything was totally intact. But I still didn't have any memory about anything else before that. So anyway, there was, where was I? Let's see. It was, we were, oh yeah, the light. Okay. So I was in the light. It was, fantastic. But then now I wasn't. I was in the next experience. So I couldn't look back and go, whoo, man, that was amazing. Can I go back and get some more of that? Because that was just like wonderful. That wasn't available. No thought to that. I wasn't thinking, I was just experiencing purely. So no attachment. So I kept moving. Now that vast field got even more infinite, and it got more depth of silence. There was hardly anything to perceive. I was just riding in this incredible, deep, rich silence, stillness, stillness. Do people understand what stillness really is? What, does anybody have any thought about stillness? What it is? We hear about it. There's a psalm, I think I was told about in the Bible. I wasn't a very good scholar at all about that, but one time somebody quoted the thing, it's the 23rd Psalm, I think, It says, "Be still and know that I am God." And when I heard that, I'm like, oh, I think I know what that means. Stillness. Stillness is not like sitting in a chair contemplating or thinking or even meditating. Stillness, perfect stillness. There's nothing to perceive. You're not even knowing that you're in perfect stillness, but it's an amazing thing. So there were little moments where I was traveling, like I knew I was moving, but then there would be these gaps of total stillness. And then every now and then there would be a little shimmery thing. Like for anybody who's ever watched Star Trek, when they beam me down, Scotty, and the little particles, they're getting like that, shimmery like, then they manifest somewhere else. Um, I would see little things that begin to ripple in that deep, rich silence. And then the next thing I know, on that, I didn't see anything. I'm back to the stillness. And then finally, I ended up at this point when now there was this amazing, incredible object right before me. And I'll try to describe it as it was crystal clear. Like if you could imagine 4 glass pyramids. And so there were 4 of them, and they were so close together, 1, 2, 3, 4, facing upward. The points were facing upward. They were perfectly aligned, but not touching at all. But there was a small gap between them. On the opposite side of that, if there was the exact same thing underneath, which was there. The base here was facing the base down here. So, and not touching, but perfectly symmetrical, clear. And so what was happening, it was turning slowly, spinning end over end, rotating like that. Just a gorgeous thing. And I don't know if you know about mandalas or anything, but all those intersecting lines. So the edges of the pyramids would create these different uh, forms and things like that, very subtle. And then the next thing I know, nothing. And I had apparently at that point, what I understand that to have been was I was at the threshold of creation. So when you cross, I had crossed that threshold, but I wouldn't be able to tell you, okay, now across this threshold. All I know, I only knew that once I reemerged from whatever that was, back over that threshold into the very first beginning moments of creation. In those first moments of creation was me also. My awareness came on, the light came on, the switch, whatever it was. In that moment, it's like looking back over your shoulder and realize where you've been. I don't know if you've ever been driving a car sometimes and you're driving along and then you suddenly realize, dang, man, was I paying attention? What? Oh, it was like that. It's like I knew I could see the contrast. And in that moment is when I understood, in that very moment, I understood the who, what, when, why, where, and how of my own being and of all this creation. That everything that source, I call it source with a capital S. I've been asked, is that God? If the beginning moment of anything, if you want to call it God, then sure, call it whatever you want. But to me, I think of it in terms of source. It was the source of all this. So it gave rise to consciousness. And in that moment, I realized why. The why of it was because that source in and of itself has no express value. It can't be known until something happens, and that is the emergence of consciousness. Way before a human body. I didn't know anything about a body as far as I knew. I had nowhere to go or anything, there was no past. So in those moments, but I realized that's why I became, so that I could be creating as I moved deeper into expanding creation, so that what we do is as we're creating the opportunity to somehow give value and expression to that which in and of itself has no express value yet, until there's something happened that consciousness begins. So At least I understood that. And then I'm moving and I began to see more and more particles begin to form very quickly, more particles. And then what I experienced also was that I there was no separation. My awareness of consciousness, I was just being permeated everything that began to manifest. So I knew in that moment there's no separation. There's the illusion of separation. I mean, everything looks different, right? You know, especially in the more dense world that we live in. But I knew that that thread is like it was like a piece of cloth that has little threads all over it. On the end, they're not neat yet. They're not sewn up. If you pull on one thread, the whole cloth will wiggle, and one of those threads on the other side. So it's all interconnecting everything in the whole creation. And I knew that that's the reality that this whole creation is. I had no idea there was anything to go back to in this world and all that. This is just all I was experiencing. And then gradually, at some point, things sped up like really fast. I was moving pretty fast. The next thing I know, I'm flying through, it's like another tunnel, except it was much narrower. And I was moving really fast and spinning through this thing. And there were these little shards, like little pieces of shards of green and black. I think I recall just those colors, just flying by. And and then the next thing I know, it's like bang, I'm slammed back into this body. So my head flew back, my eyes open, and I see above me in that hospital room there, and everything was glowing a little bit, and then it became into clearer perception, and I saw these little sculpted looking little things. You know what Cheetos look like? A little snack food, kind of orange, puffy looking. I'm looking over that and go, well, that's what I was seeing at first, and then later, as as getting used to being back here, I realized what that was. You know, those ceiling tiles that are sculpted a little bit? That's what I was seeing and didn't know what was. Well, then I looked around, I see there's a door over there, but I didn't know what a door was. I saw some equipment, had no idea what that was, anything. And I saw my dad sitting over in the chair. Well, first I moved my hand. I saw my hand move. And I wondered, what's that? And then I realized, hey, I'm in this. What is this? But I wasn't panicking. It wasn't like scary or anything. It was just curious. What is this? But I had the entire memory of who I am and really am, who, what, when, where, why I am of the journey. That's what I came back with. I had that. But all this stuff, totally new and no memory whatsoever of ever having existed in this world at all. So once I moved my hand, I realized, oh, I'm in this. I didn't know why. That's okay. The next thing I know, I heard myself speak. And the words I said was, as I saw my father, I didn't know who he was. I didn't recognize him, but I saw him there. And I said, what happened? And as I spoke those words, I wondered, how did I know how to do that? And, and so he said, well, don't you remember, son? You were really sick and we thought we were going to lose you there for a while. I didn't know what he meant. I didn't know that I'd gone through all that stuff. I went through the surgery, any of that stuff. I had no memory of it. So I was quiet. I didn't say much at all for a good while. I didn't speak because I didn't know what else to be saying. And so that was happening. I was just observing. And then the next thing I know, the first memory to come back, gradually more memories were coming back, over time. But the very first one was the memory of how much pain I had been in. And it freaked me out for a moment. I grabbed the rails on the edge of the bed and I dreaded, like, oh no, not that. And I waited, like, here it comes, and nothing happened. Like there was no more pain. That was it. That was done. That was over with. That got wiped out earlier. And I went, well, okay. That was the only moment. If people have asked me, like, do you regret having to come back? You know how some people say, oh man, it was so wonderful. But I got told it wasn't my time. I had to go back. And I really didn't want to go, but there must be a reason, you know. And I'm not one of those people. I have never, ever, not once for one single moment, ever um, uh, been sorry that I came into this world from that experience. There's a reason for that as well. Um, and I think it is because when I stepped back into this world, I had no memory of it. Therefore, I had no expectation. I didn't have a contrast to say, well, yeah, sure, I'm seeing things differently, but I also knew what I was seeing was this, was that, what I had been through, that connection. I knew the connectedness of everything was that's here. It's just being expressed in a more concrete, dense manifestation, not as subtle as the whole journey, but I knew that underneath all of that, this is all that is. What is that saying? All this is that, and that's all there is to that. So that's where it was with that whole experience in those moments. Gradually, some memories started to slip in a little bit. I remember finally remember my dad, who he was while I was in the hospital. I was in the hospital for a month, and so I remembered my dad, but I didn't know there was anything outside of that room I was in. I mean, I didn't remember that. This was my world now. I was in this room, and somebody would come in. They'd say who they were. At first, people were a little concerned. Like, I wonder if he had some brain damage or something. Because people ask me, like, well, how long were you gone? And this and that. No one really knows for sure, but I believe it was a matter of moments. And then I reemerged because they didn't put any paddles on me or anything like that. I somehow just made it back. Uh, but it felt like an eternity almost compared to actual clock time here. In fact, there is no big clock in the whole creation. We create clocks and things to help us manage our lives in this densely manifested world to kind of grow and evolve as best we can and figure it out. So, but there I was, no memory of stuff. And at some point, I knew like I the crisis was over. Oh, they determined that I didn't have brain damage or anything like that. They just said, oh, he has amnesia. Uh, so anyway, then at some point I realized, hey, you know, I knew that I'm healing. Whatever was wrong, I'm healing. And I knew like I got to get out of here because this is not where I'm going to heal, not in this place. You go to the hospital, get fixed or whatever you got to do, but as soon as you can, you got to get out of there so you can heal. Healing is where you got to be. And so I just somehow knew that. And I kept insisting, we need to go. And they kept insisting, no, man, you're so weak. And it would be dangerous for you to leave just yet because if anything happens and you get any kind of infection or anything like that, then that could be, you know, the end of you. But I knew that wasn't going to happen. I knew I had that journey for a reason, and I knew I needed to get back out and go heal and then see what was going to happen because I had no idea what my life was going to be after that. It was like there's no manual, or I didn't get a manual. So anyway, that was where I was at there, and I finally, I was so insistent that they finally agreed, and we only lived maybe a couple of miles away from the hospital and everything, and they said, okay, I tell you what, you can go. Here's what your dad's going to have to do to help take care of you, and if anything happens at all, you get right back over here. Okay, good. So he agreed, and so what they did is they put me in a wheelchair because I couldn't walk. I went in the hospital. I probably weighed maybe 147 pounds. I wasn't very big anyway. Uh, when I came out of the hospital, I barely weighed 100 pounds, and my muscles were atrophied. I couldn't walk. It's not the greatest shape, you know, but I knew I'd be okay. But they had put me in a wheelchair. They rolled me out from my room and go, oh, look, everything was happening. Look at all this stuff, you know. And then we went out through the doors to the outside. And that was a fantastic moment because it was like, oh, look at all this stuff. It was like in the springtime, there were birds chirping and you know, the outdoor buildings and just, you know, all the stuff. And it was almost overwhelming, but I still had that sense of the connectedness of everything. And then I saw some people and I got excited because look, more people like me. Oh, wow, this is beautiful. You know, and that's where I was at, you know, and then we went home and the ride home, you know, that's when I understood the mortal nature of living in these bodies because every little bump we hit reminded me like, oh yeah, I'm in this thing here. And but we got home and then gradually I kept healing. They kept taking care of me. I couldn't eat anything except pureed vegetables, cooked pureed vegetables, and no meat, none of that stuff for quite some time for everything to be able to heal up. So how are we doing there? Are we I don't know where we're at time wise. We okay, Diane? Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you.
We have
I
a,
did.
we have another hour.
Oh, good. Okay, we're doing fine.
We have a question if you want that.
Yes, absolutely. It's a good.
Sarah says Neil deGrasse Tyson, a brilliant scientist, said that given the number of planets in the universe, it is certain that there are other intelligent life forms. How does the existence of other beings play into our near-death experiences on Earth? Are all of our souls commingled?
Hmm. Well, based on what I was describing and my understanding that anything and everything in the creation is connected and is of that source, and it's permeated, it's sustained by that source. So, in a way, you know, I almost feel like it might be an arrogant thing for us to think that we are the only functional, thinking, sentient beings in this whole creation. I don't know why it would only be limited to us. Um, I do know that there are different things that I have seen because my perception changed tremendously. When I came back, I was being able to perceive things that nobody else around me was. At first, I thought everybody would see all this. And then I realized soon, no, maybe not. And I realized everybody didn't know quite what I had experienced and know from that. So that's when I began to realize, oh, this is going to be an interesting journey here. This is a Thomas Gates 2.0. uh, but I have seen entities in my work that I'll describe in a minute, helping people. I have uh, seen them, different entities and things. I also see angels quite often, especially when I'm doing my healing spectrums work. Uh, there are different kinds of angels that I, you know, perceive, and so I know those exist. So, um, and they're not human, and they don't function the way we do. They have one purpose. Whatever it is they're assigned to do, that's what they do perfectly. They don't struggle like we do with thinking about stuff. They don't even think, they just do what they're created to do. It's a beautiful thing. because you know how we do, we create too, but sometimes we make it complicated, man. You know, we get it all twisted up and everything. So I don't know if that answers anything, but yeah, sure. You know, there's more. Now, are there aliens and things like that? Probably. Anything's possible is the way I see it. Have I seen any aliens? Not that I'm aware of, but it's possible, and I just didn't know it. Um, but I wouldn't be surprised at all, you know, because what I experienced in that journey, talk about the universe and all that. I mean, we were talking about the entire field of creation there's almost no measurement to that. So there could be other universes over here that have people like us or whatever, who knows? Great science fiction books and things have great stories and things like that. But you know how when Star Trek first came out, when I was growing up in the 60s, they had their little flip phone. It wasn't a flip phone, it was what do you call it? A communication device. There, it flipped open. Well, lo and behold, guess what we have? After time, oh, we have flip phones now. So they could look ahead and see things. And so I consider like what we don't see generally here doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means it's not within our field of perception. It might be in others, like I do perceive things. I'm fine with there being other sentient beings in the creation. I don't have a problem with that. I don't care for some of the entities. They're not the most pleasant. They don't bother me. In fact, I'll tell you about that in a little bit here. Anyway, so that was a good question, though.
We didn't mention. I didn't mention that Craig mentioned that there is Eckhart Tolle's book on Stillness Speaks.
Mm-hmm. I've actually given talks to Eckhart Tolle groups. I used to tour and travel around, talk about this stuff. And I was in LA one time, and there was a Eckhart Tolle group. He wasn't there, but somebody was heading up a group, kind of like your IANDS thing, and people came. And so I presented there. I'll tell you the funny thing about that Eckhart Tolle, when he came out with his very first book, what was it called? It was The Power of Now. The Power of Now. So I was in a library one day and I'm walking along, and that book apparently had just come out. I hadn't heard about it yet, but I'm walking along and I see this book on the shelf and I go, I picked it up immediately and then I put it back down. I think his title was too good. The Power of Now. I understood what that is, like talking about being in that present only. The power of now. It's where everything happens. All creation comes out of now. The present is the soul of creation. It's the seed of creation. So when I saw that, I got really excited, but I didn't even buy the book. I set it down. But then since then, I really like him a lot because he's dead on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Elizabeth asked, have you ever read the Tibetan Book of the Dead? Just wondering if you feel that any of your experiences align with the Tibetan understanding of bardos.
No, I mean I've heard bits and pieces. It was funny because I never was that curious. People when they say, "Oh, I'd want to get my hands on everything about death and this and that," but I was finding that understanding the essence of everything, and here we are manifesting in this world. But there was an interesting thing, when I learned to meditate, it was like transcendental meditation, and at some point, 5 years after the experience, I went to a big course. Meditation course. I've been going a few residence courses where I could get a lot of meditation in because it was helping me reintegrate, like I could sustain that value of stillness and yet merge it into the field of activity with that underneath it. And so I kind of lost track of the point of that. The question again.
It says if you feel any of your experiences align with the Tibetan understanding
yeah.
of bardos.
So one time I got a phone call. I've been speaking by then a little bit more, but I got a phone call from a guy. He was Indian, Eastern Indian, and he had heard about my experience and he wanted to ask me. He wanted to interview me. He had some questions. He was writing a book about translating the Ved, talking about death. What it says, the Vedic knowledge, I don't know if you know, but the Vedic knowledge is absolutely some of the just oldest there is in this whole creation. They pretty well somehow got a glimpse of this whole thing. So anyway, he's asking me these questions. He'd say, well, just tell me what happened in that journey. I started and I was sharing, and he stopped me every now and then. He'd say, "Oh, when this happened, did you notice this? Did this happen?" And a lot of times I was saying, yeah, it did. As a matter of fact, yeah. And then I go on, and he stopped me again and asked all these things. So at the end of that interview, because I didn't know anything about the Veda at that point, really, not much. I was just learning. And he said, "Well, I have to tell you, what your words were almost a literal translation of what the Veda says about death." And I went, "Oh, well, okay, that makes sense." But I've never felt like this whole experience ever made me any more special than anybody else, because I know for a fact that we can all experience it. We don't have to die either to do it, or have a near-death experience even. And I've had people say, "Hey, man, I wish I could have one of those near-death experiences so I could know kind of these things that you're talking about." And I say, be careful what you wish for. There are certain things that are not so pleasant in the process of getting there, but you don't have to have it. We don't have to have it. It's available to every living human being. It's just that we have to do things to help create the field of possibility to help cultivate. We begin to cultivate, and that comes through stillness, being able to sit in stillness in a way that coherence can happen. And it's all about brainwave function. Actually, I don't think about that when I'm working with people and all that, but I do know what's happening there. And we did some research on that. We did some brainwave studies on some work that I do. And so I totally get, here we are. We've got this computer up here, and we've got all these peripheral apps and programs throughout this thing. It's like that. So I digress.
And Anne said, J.J. Hurtak, the author related to Gene Roddenberry and others in a secret group that met, stories on Star Trek based on some reality of the time. That doesn't quite make sense. I think something's left out.
Is there a question, or that's just a comment about that?
It was just a comment. Sorry, it didn't make
Oh.
sense. I was typing it quickly.
Oh yeah, no problem, no problem. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
Anne.
I loved Star Trek, man. I mean, I hadn't had that experience by when that was happening. That happened later, but then looking back at it, I go, those guys were kind of plugged in.
Elizabeth said, sounds like meditation is a key for that and can help with the death process when it does come. I think that's probably true.
Yeah. What I was saying, people ask me, well, what should I do if either I'm facing imminent death or a loved one is? What should we do? I said, well, there's really nothing to do. Your soul, your consciousness knows exactly what to do. Nobody can tell you how you're supposed to go through your death experience. My experience was my experience. It was unique to me. Yours will be too. But it's based on who we're being in this world, and in those moments as we are transcending away from the body, there's certain things that are kind of important. But we kind of do it naturally anyway. Once we get past certain phase that we're experiencing the suffering part, we're not in that anymore. We might look like it to our loved ones, and it's important for them to understand they might look like they're suffering and struggling to stay alive, but the body's doing that. The body is programmed to survive no matter what, and it will fight to the very end till it can't anymore. However, consciousness, while that's going on, consciousness over here, your soul or whatever, is taking care of business, preparing to leave this form behind and move on. So that's an important thing for people to realize as they're looking at their loved one, because we feel like helpless. We don't want to see them suffering. We wish there's something we can do. And remind me to come back to that in just a moment. As soon as I finish this thought here, there's one other thing you do. But my advice has always been, let me see, if I could say one thing of value, of how it might help with that, it would be, if at all possible, and it's not that easy, but if it's possible that you could forget about everything you ever thought you knew or believed, let go and just simply be in the moment. because then you won't be so attached to all that other stuff. And that will allow you to move deeper into the experience of that journey. Uh, because you can have anything you want, just like we do here. We can create whatever we want. And if we have a strong enough belief and faith in that, then we can have that. But same thing, as we leave this behind, we can have that. If people want to see golden sidewalks, heaven, past loved ones, none of whom I experienced in my journey once I was left the body. And the memory got erased because I didn't have any memory of any thought. I couldn't have that kind of thought. So I just kept moving deeper and deeper. And that's how I was able to get all the way to the point of the source and realize the truth of this entire creation, you know. So just letting go and trusting that your consciousness and your soul will know exactly what to do, because it will. You know, once you get certain phase, I wanted to come back to that one thing. If you're with somebody and they're in the bed there and you're standing next to them, we want to comfort them, right? We think we can do something to comfort them, but they're in the process of letting go of the physical form. A lot of times people will want to stroke someone's arm or something as if that's comforting. It is when we're in this world and we get hurt or something like that, you know, that's comfortable. But when a person's getting into that stage, I always recommend the best thing you do, you can just hold their hand, don't move, just hold their hand. And the best thing to say is, we love you, or I love you. That's good. That's that they can take. But I know from my experience of what it feels like when someone's doing that, it feels like, you know, sandpaper or something on your skin. The sensation and what it's doing is that sensation is holding you. You're in the process of letting go of this corporeal form, and yet that's pulling you, and it makes it a little more challenging in the part. So it's not as comfortable as we might think it is. It is in this world, but as we're in the process of transitioning, so it's best, you know, you don't have to do that. Yeah. Anyway, was there another question? Oh, can't hear you.
Yes. Should we pray or send healing to someone who's making their transition, or will that hurt them?
Oh no, that's prayer's fine. It's good. The best way to do prayer is like when I do sessions with people, I always have a little thing that I say to myself. Um, and sometimes I might call on those in the creation that I know exist that are helpful to us as human beings in our journeys. Whether it's, you know, God, Jesus, whatever you want, uh, that resonates with you. I might say those names, and then I would say, I don't have to give you the exact detail, but I mean, essentially what you're doing is you're saying, may it be for the highest good of the mind, body, heart, and soul of, and you say that person's name, because we don't know what is the highest good for somebody. We might pray that they go and have this experience or that experience, or, you know, whatever, but we don't know what the highest good is for anybody. I mean, if I ask you, do you know what your highest good is? If you ask me that, I would go, no, I don't know. How am I supposed to know that, you know? But the soul inside knows. And so prayer is just simple. You wish for the highest good of the mind, body, heart, and soul. Now they're leaving the body and the heart and the mind behind, but the soul is going to continue. So, but that's how you can include in your prayer.
Elizabeth says that is exactly what my teacher says about death. Let go and don't hang on so you can move quickly through it and even become transcendent, aka enlightened in that realm.
Yeah.
He called that moment the instant, but practicing meditation daily because that helps. He
Yeah.
actually died for 8 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, it cultivates that platform in a way. It makes it easier with less resistance. Yeah, yeah. Good point. Good point. Hmm. Sound like there was a question. Was that a question? I heard a pink. Oh, okay. So let's see. Should we continue? Okay. Trying to think where I was at that point in the journey. You had to remind me where I left off. Except I can't hear you yet. You have to unmute. Hmm. So let's see. Oh, okay.
You were back, your dad had just taken you back home.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so I was under the wings and the loving care of my mother and father, and uh, they understood enough to not be freaked out. They might have been, but they didn't show it to me. And so they were nurturing me back to a little better health. They had a house next door to their lake house. Uh, and so they put me in there. And then I would walk across the patio and go into their house, as I got strong enough to do that, and had dinner there. And we spend time together. And funny thing was so gradually, they had neighbors that knew who I was, but she told them ahead of time, like, okay, he's very kind of delicate here. Here's the thing, he doesn't really remember a lot of things here. He's okay, but so we'd go sit on the patio that was covered, and she'd invite one of the neighbors over. Just one. I couldn't handle crowds. So one we were sitting on the patio one time, and this very delightful woman, Italian woman she was telling me about her life, and she plays accordion, this and that, and I didn't really know what that was, but found out later. But she was just a very pleasant person. Just a good person. And so we're sitting there, and next thing you know, this guy drives up in a pickup truck, and he kind of gets out of his truck, and he's yelling at her, and he's just really upset with her. He's really mad, and said stuff that obviously was hurtful to her. And I could see the expression on her face totally change from this beautiful, ebullient, radiant smile all of a sudden to this dark sadness, the impact it had. I was shocked. I had no idea. Why did that happen? Why would a person do that? Because I was still with this thing of realizing we are all the same. We might look different, men, women, this and that, but we have that infinite connection. Why would we do anything like that to hurt ourselves? Because if we're hurting someone, we're hurting ourselves too. And I couldn't understand, why didn't he understand this? So you can see that in the beginning, the reentry for me, there was some learning curve. And in that moment is when I realized, oh man, okay, this is going to be an interesting little ride, isn't it? I'm going to probably learn a lot more things that you know, I didn't know about, So I asked my mother this later. I said, why? How could this be? And in her own, she had a unique spiritual value quality that just was so nurturing to us in our family. Not religious, but spiritual. And she just understood. And she said, look, honey, you're probably going to find out there are a lot of people who, because they didn't have the experience you had, they don't know these things. They don't understand that. So you just have to be prepared that there'll be these moments, and you can kind of handle it however you can, and just know that. So that was reassuring. And so uh, as far as people goes in that experience. Also, people would sometimes tell me, like, hey, like back in school, there's a lot I don't remember about school. Totally just nothing. You could talk to me all day long and say, don't you remember, man, we were doing this or that? Man, I don't know. I still have gaps, but it doesn't bother me. And every now and then, one of them go like, oh yeah, I remember that. here's the thing about memories in the past, like a lot of us live in the past more than we do in the present. That's like Eckhart Tolle, power of now. We want to be in the now, but we get pulled and caught by experiences that we judge. Our judgment causes us suffering. We judge something was good or bad, better or worse, things like that. Then that prevents us from being more in the present to experience the moment. Because as great as some memory might have been, or as traumatic as it may have been, whichever, those are in the past. They have an impact on your physiology to this day. And that's part of my work, is helping to release some of those old remnants of trauma that maybe happened a long time ago, so that your physiology can shift, and then your consciousness also begins to be more present. So anyway, that's the thing.
Julia asks, what are your meditation or stillness practices, and do you do it every day?
Oh, well, I learned transcendental meditation, and I do that. I learned that just before this happened, so I've been doing that for practically 50 years, I guess, right at. So I still do that. And also, there were gifts that came as a result of this journey that didn't appear to me at first. Gradually over time, my perception kept evolving and changing. And then, I'll share that in a minute. But yeah, when the gifts came, there was an ability from that to do something I call a self-treatment. And I do that every day too. And that is like doing a defrag on a computer. When you got corrupted files and then things aren't communicating well, just stressing the system. Like I do this self-treatment. I teach people how to do all that too. Is that it's like a reset. It's like hitting the defrag button. You don't have to worry about what the thing is doing. It's just like it cleans it up. Kind of helps eliminate some of the corruption in the files. Some files you don't need anymore, so they get kind of eliminated, and you don't need them. So that's sort of my little spiritual thing. But taking time, being sure to take time for stillness, and not judging what stillness should be. There's no should or could or anything about stillness. It is just what it is. And sometimes we do things, we can do meditation or whatever, and we begin to settle down. And I know what's going on with that in terms of the brainwave function, going through alpha, theta, and then into delta and all that. I have research on that we did at a brain lab. I'll get into that in just a moment. So anyway, yeah, that's what I do. And when I'm doing sessions and with this work that I do, and then my consciousness goes into that same space. So I'm just witnessing. I'm aware, but I'm witnessing, but I'm not managing or manipulating or anything. I'm not figuring things out. I'm just present in the moment, perceiving what I perceive. And somehow the way this gift work that came later, just through that observation, allows that individual's brain function to slip into that range where the body naturally will begin its healing and regenerative processes. We all have that. That happens in sleep mostly, but this turns it on and accelerates it. It speeds things up quickly. So you don't have to sit there for 8 hours either, but you still need sleep. Don't get me wrong. Okay. So how are we doing on time now, Diane? Okay.
It's 3:19 now. We have till 4.
Oh, good. All right. So, unless there's any other questions, I'll kind of move forward a little bit. Yeah. So there was gradually, like I had enough kind of memory stuff about how the world is here that I could, and I got strong enough at least to leave my parents' place and go back to Dallas. I was married at the time, in which they told me that at one point when I was at my parents'. And I said, "Really? I have a wife? Well, where is she?" "Oh, she's in Dallas. That's where you guys were before all this happened, before you moved up here and then ended up in the hospital." I had moved there to get out of the stuff, and then I was going to get a little job and then get a place, and then I was going to have her come, and so that we could be there, which ended up not ever happening. But yeah, so gradually, I got my dad, convinced him, just like I did to let me leave the hospital before. I convinced him to take me back to Dallas so I can be back with my wife, and my friends and all. He didn't want to do it at first because I could barely walk. I couldn't really walk more than a few feet. I was still pretty weak. And but I convinced him. I said it'll be okay. And so we did that. Took me in, and the look on my wife's face at first when she saw me, she had come to visit me in the hospital, but I had no memory of that. I didn't know that. She knew it was pretty serious. When I came back and she saw me, I saw a look on her face like, oh man, I'm going to have to really work hard to try to take care of him and still work and manage all this stuff and all that. I kept reassuring her, don't worry, everything's okay. And I was fine, man. I wasn't expecting anything in particular at all. I had to lay around in the bed quite a bit on the couch and stuff like that, and begin to walk a little more as I could. So gradually I got strong enough. And then we all moved from Dallas to Fort Worth, where I wanted to play drums again. Well, actually, we moved to Denton, Texas. They told me I played drums, and I didn't remember that at first. But I wasn't strong enough at first, even when they told me, like, well, I wouldn't have been able to do it. But I didn't remember that I did. And so finally, I was strong enough, and I went and watched other players and began to get used to the idea of playing again. And so, where my drums got my drums, I sat down at the drums and just sat there for a minute. I thought, well, I, what am I supposed to do? I don't know. I don't remember. They said, just bang around a little bit. I started doing that. And the next thing you know, I'm like, I got it. I know how to play. And so that was in there somewhere. But it was a little different too, because they told me, I didn't know this, but they told me that I seemed to be able to learn things at a more accelerated rate musically than before. So my technique could evolve and change. But it was such a joy. Oh my gosh, sitting down and playing drums. And to this day, I still play. It's one of those things, besides meditating and transcending, it's like that. I actually transcend sometimes playing drums. It's physical activity, but there I am transcending. And sometimes I would witness. I remember one time looking down, I was up above the stage and the players were there. I was viewing from above my body. My body was playing, but my awareness was above. And I saw this subtle thread that connected to everyone's heart, and they all came back to my heart. And so this flow was happening, and it was like just a magical thing, so effortless. It was beautiful. And then at the end of the song, it was a pretty dynamic song too. And at the end of the song, there was this like crazy applause, and then it was back into like my regular perception. So they just really dug it. They had no idea what was happening, but they were feeling something. And I noticed that about audiences. When you are being coherent in a way like that, it's influencing and people are feeling things. So, but then, I continued doing that. And I've always continued to do that as I got stronger, things happened. One thing that was going on, by the way, and this is important for people to understand, family members who have someone who went through a near-death experience. Well, when people come back from that, they're not the same. They're that same person, but they're not going to be like they were before. But family sometimes expects them to be. Yes, you had that experience. It's amazing, wonderful, and everything like that. But people, we all know, like, yeah, we got to change and everything. But people don't like change if you change too much too fast. So I've helped people with that, by consulting with their family members too, and helping them understand when they hear parts of my journey, they understand like, oh, you can't expect that of them. They need your support. They need to not be judged if they're not the same like that.
Ramona asked if you have a sense of why you were chosen for this experience.
Well, I believe looking back, those experiences I was having as a child out in the woods, that knowledge there, I think that's when this all started. I had no idea I was ever going to be in this position that I'm in now. But I look back at it and I realized one of the reasons I was having those experiences, it was helping to cultivate me in a way that I would be able to experience this in a way and come back and share that experience. I believe that near-death experience is not just for us alone, but it's meant to be shared so that we can help people understand not so much of it. To me, it's not so much about death, it's about life. How we can live in this world if we have a bit more understanding and there's no over there. People say, what's it like over there? Or what's it like on the other side? And I always say, I don't know. As far as I know, there's not another side. It's all the same. It's all one thing. It's just being expressed in different values. So we have a very dense aspect here in this phase of life. It doesn't mean that this doesn't exist over here simultaneously. It does. We just have this momentary interruptions, like a little hiccup, going one way or the other. There's life, there's this death process, and then there's life. That's all it is. It just keeps going. It's just a little momentary thing. Interesting thing about that, I've heard people say, yeah, if you reincarnate, after you died, you come back and you continue where you left off. In other words, karmically, you come back. Now you got to kind of go from there and continue to evolve. What I would say, and what my experience is and was, is that sure, yeah, you come up to this point, and then there's the death thing, and then you move on. Eventually, if you're reincarnated, if you believe in that, I kind of do. So anyway, here I am. Instead of going back to where you left off, the death process is like in Vedic tradition, there's a thing called yagya, and it's a little ceremony that burns off karma. It smooths the path for continued evolution. So what happens is, instead of coming back here, that death thing moved the goalpost, moved you up here. It burned up karma quite a bit. And then you make it back. Now you don't have to go all the way back here. Now you are here and continue on. I see a question. Oh, can't hear you.
I'm going to go back just a little bit. Chad was wondering if there are different categories of angels who come
Yes.
for different reasons, and do they look different?
Yeah.
And
Good point.
can you differentiate them from other angels?
Yeah. I don't claim to be an expert in angels. All I can do is share my experience about them. And when I was a child, I didn't ever really, I saw angels, but I only saw them in stained glass and in pretty Bible stuff and everything like that, and statues in the church and whatnot. So I didn't really know for sure if they're really angels, until finally I did see them. Uh, so over time, I began to once this healing experience became manifest for me in my life, I would begin to perceive angels. And so let's see, the ones that I'm aware of, they talk about when we were kids, we have these guardian angels. Uh, that actually happened to me one time, where I was digging in a trench way down deep on a building project, and there was this pipe down there. It was about 5 foot deep, and maybe 2.5, 3 feet max. And I was down there and I had my head down, and they'd been working on some forms, and this form got loose and it was full of these metal clamps and everything. And it fell. But before it fell, no one was up there to tell me, hey, watch out. It just happened. I was suddenly pulled out of that trench onto the ground, and then that thing went. Had I not been pulled out of that trench, I would have been decapitated. And I'm looking around for who pulled me out, and there wasn't anybody there. And that's when I realized, oh, I think I might have been a guardian angel. I didn't see it, but there was no way. I didn't jump out. I didn't know it was happening. I just literally was like somebody grabbed me by the shoulders and yanked me out of there. So I knew without that, so maybe they are you. But then I began to see them over time as I was doing sessions with people, group sessions. So there's this one I call, there's this huge one. I mean, like, I don't know how tall. I call that one like, he's like a watcher angel who oversees large areas like a town or whatever. I saw this one on a big spire in the downtown Fairfield, Iowa one time. A lot of meditation goes on there. So anyway, he was just up there. And I thought, well, wow, okay, he's like a guardian watching over. But then as I began to do more of the work that came about from this experience, the healing spectrums, I call it, I started noticing more. And there's one that I definitely call a watcher angel. And he's taller than human beings, probably tall enough that most ceilings, he would be, his head would be up at the ceiling, most likely, and um, sometimes they might be like 8 feet tall or more. And they are just, when I'm doing the work, I see them over, I'm aware of them in the corner, their presence. And then sometimes when I'm working with someone and they're sharing with me, and maybe in a moment they're having an emotional release of something, the next thing I know, that watcher angel has suddenly appeared right behind them, with them. I don't know what he's doing. I don't ever concern myself with that because they know what they're doing. But one moment's here, next moment here. There's no like gradual, okay, he's moving over here. No wings, by the way. I've never seen an angel with wings, but I understand why there might be that concept of that. If you want to know that, I don't always tell you that. But so there it is. And so, he's there to help facilitate some kind of process that's going on. Well, then also there are what I call the healing angels, and they're maybe more closer to our size. Uh, and when I'm doing work with people, there are always two of them with the person. And like if a person's sitting in a chair, there would be one on this side, one on this side, and they'll place their angel hands on your shoulders. I don't know what they're doing, but they're helping in your healing process in some way. They don't communicate with me. I don't talk to them. They don't communicate with me. I think one time one did something to acknowledge that I was there, but that's it. Then let's see. Oh, there's this one angel. This is why I think the concept of wings could be. There's this one that has to do with release around death. And it can appear in different times, but it oftentimes will at those moments of the passing. But not always. It could be a person who hasn't healed from the death of a loved one. Occasionally, it can manifest there, like when I'm doing session. And I mean to tell you, this angel is so brilliant. It's almost like you can't look at it because it's just the brightness of it is so overwhelming, white, beautiful, just intense white, but there's a being there. And so I don't see that one that often, but that's a pretty amazing one. So those are ones that I'm aware of. Doesn't mean that's all there is. There are probably a lot of them. I don't study angels. People think if you see angels, man, you got to get all these books and study angels. I've never been that kind of person. I was like, in fact, it took me a while to even, I don't think I've ever actually read one full book on near-death experience. I've written one, but I read it from my experience, because I don't know. I just felt like somehow the way the event happened and what's been occurring, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I just never really thought to do that. Although somebody gave me a Betty Eadie's book, way back when, and I started reading it, and something came up, and I couldn't finish it. But everyone has unique, different experiences. One thing I would advise when it comes to how do you trust information about near-death experiences, or any kind of spiritual experience or otherwise. I always say, if somebody's trying to tell you this is how it will be, this is what you will experience, then I would run away, because every human being is at a different level of evolution. We're constantly evolving. And so where we're at, we will have a particular kind of experience. This person over here, like, I didn't have a lot of stuff that some of the other people had, but so that's the way it is. So we don't entrust our own spiritual evolution that way, to the degree that we have to totally believe what someone tells us. That's
Joe,
it.
Joe said, are you saying that we are all living in the same dimension? This contradicts much of what we know about NDE experience. I have to tell you that what I learned on the other side is that there's no one way to do anything, which is
Exactly.
basically what you are just saying now. Also, this brought to mind uh, what Kimberly Clark talked about in her book, where she said she was and when she was still really in contact with the other side. She said the other side was about 3 feet above the earth, and she could see things going on there. She said it was like they were having a cocktail party and they were talking. They weren't paying any attention to her whatsoever,
Yeah.
uh, but she could see it going on, and it was about 3 feet above
Mhm.
the earth.
And it's like, it's one of those things, like, what are we going to experience? I had a guy one time, he called me. He's got a book out. I can't remember his name. He was a a Baptist minister. He's one of those hellfire brimstone kind of guys. He always preached about that, the fear part. And he had heard about me somewhere, and he called me and wanted to talk. And at some point, I don't remember his name, but he's got his book out there. He's one of the NDE people. And I guess maybe he's gotten through it. I don't know. But when he called me, he asked me about my experience. I told him, and he said, "Oh man," he said, "I didn't have that. I had a terrible experience. It scared me to death. And he was so shaken by it that he couldn't do his preaching thing. It just shocked him, because he was so invested in the belief of heaven and hell, and that belief that you will hear people saying we're not worthy, all those things that sometimes some of the Christian thing is taught people to believe. We're all sinners, we're not worthy, this and that, and yet we're children of God. And so we expect our parent would treat us like he loved us, things like that. So anyway, I always struggled with that kind of thing. But um, um, he had the experience where he was so invested in that belief of hell, and he didn't believe he was a good enough person to go to heaven. He was dying, and he came out, and he got to go and see the hell side. In his mind, it was terrifying. It really shook him up for a while. It took him a while to recover. Thing is, like, when I went on my journey, I'd heard about hell, but because my memory was erased, I didn't have anything that I could think like that. All I was is in the moment. So I just kept moving. I moved to the light and all that. Totally wonderful, beautiful experience. Um, but he was so attached to that. And so that's why I say, when you're in the death process, if you can, as hard as it would be, because this stuff's been drilled into you, your beliefs of what that will be like, or what someone told you it would be like. You got to just trust, let
So
go, and be.
trust.
You'll be fine. But it's like a vacuum of a big old truck that you're on the road and a big truck goes by and the wind is sucking behind it. It's like these structures in our minds and these beliefs and things that we're attached to having to be reality. It's like there's that little vacuum. It'll kind of pull you in that direction. So yeah, the whole death thing, it's not horrible. There's so many stories I could share with you. This would take like a week's worth of stuff, experiences of things and how it all comes together and points to that one thing. We're
Catherine wants to know if you ever hear music.
in the journey.
She doesn't say. Did you ever hear music? Is her question.
No, once I left the body, there was absolute perfect silence. Never once did I hear anything, even when those beings were communicating with me, there was no audio to it. It was communication. It was intuitive, whatever it was, telepathically. I don't know what it was. I didn't have, a brain there, so I don't know how it was happening. But uh, no, it's funny. And I'm a musician. You might think like, wow, you should have heard this great music. Got to jam with some guys up there. Now, but for me, that's how it was. And also, I never saw after those beings, I never saw another being, not another like a past loved one or anything, because some people say you'll be reunited with your loved ones, and you might, if you want that, if that's a strongly held belief, you can have that. I know my mother exists and has communicated with me. She's long past, but there's some things that I learned about who we are, my mother, my father, and myself. I found out that we are connected together always throughout all time. We might not, there are times when, okay, they're not here, but now they're here. I'm still here. The other was there. We spend time spiritually in this world together. Yeah.
Kim shared an interesting experience. She said, my mother had an NDE in her 80s. Before the NDE, she was in a skilled nursing facility, had Parkinson's and hallucinations, became mean and nasty, and then became a drooling zombie.
Mm,
After her NDE, she was able to speak coherently and was able to walk with a walker and was loving and kind. Amazing. She had some kind of a healing. I believe we each have what we need, and it's unique. Every experience is unique to the person, and
yeah.
every person, every soul's needs are different.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like things that happen to you that can lead to that is could be terrible things. I know people. I was in another book, and we all met one time for book signings and stuff out in L.A. And we were sharing experiences that we had that were highly traumatic, and what sense of gratitude later we had for having gone through it. And there were stories in there where we meet each other for the first time and go like, "Oh, you're so and so. Oh, that. Oh my God. There's no way I could not have gotten through that. I don't have any sense of gratitude, man." And they say, "Are you kidding me? What you went through?" And in that moment, I realized nothing's going to happen to us that we can't process and handle. If we couldn't, it would be something else from somebody else, like. So life, as challenging as it can be at times, these things are not like some sentence against us that like, yeah, well, somebody says you got to suffer, so here you go. It's like, no, these are things that we can evolve through and grow through if we have the presence, the awareness to realize this is not some fluke thing that just happened. There's a purpose it's going to serve in my life. And I just have to, I might not know what it is today, but eventually. So we're always growing, evolving. That's that cycle again, the creation, maintenance, destruction. So we're all living in different paradigms all the time. There's a macro paradigm and there's a micro paradigm, and we're all the micro guys. But
Yep.
combined collectively, we create the macro reality. We all structure it that way. So we have the power to determine what we want to create, but we have to do it from a state of coherence.
Um, we have about 15 minutes
Oh,
left.
shoot.
Mary asked when this meeting's recording will be available, and I mentioned it early on. She must have missed it. Uh, Vicky, who normally runs this meeting, is in the throes of new love. I don't know if she minds if I tell that or not. I hope not.
Right.
And so she's not quite up to her usual standards here. So usually she gets it up within 24 hours, but at the moment she's out of town, so it might
Yeah.
be a few days, but eventually it will be online. And
Okay.
she also asked about what happened to Denise Lynn's recording, because Denise was our speaker last month. And I am sorry to announce that that recording will not be available. Zoom fell through last month and lost everything.
Oh,
It was all caused by Zoom, nothing we did. But because of that, I was talking to Denise during that time. She's going to speak again to our group in March.
that's
So
good.
you can look forward to her coming back and redoing are doing another session, which will tell a lot of the same information, hopefully, so we don't miss on it entirely. Just so you know. So we have 15 minutes left, and you suggest.
Well, we won't do a 15-minute thing. We still do something, but I didn't really get to, okay, so what happened? There was the emergence of some healing gift that happened. I call it healing spectrums. Healing
Mhm.
spectrum for health and wholeness. I had to give it a name, because it didn't come with it. But somehow my perception had been changed enough that through innocent observation, when I'm sitting with a person doing this with the intention that, okay, I'm doing this session now, I'm able to perceive subtle aspects of human physiology and those things that sometimes are part of the network that structures some dysfunction, whether it be physical and or emotional. Everything's emotional, by the way. You can't have physical injury without emotional. So that's there. So it's the emotional part that has to get released because it holds in place longer the physical aspect. So I've been doing that for the last 20 something years. And I have clients all around the world that I work with. And um, it's the kind of thing where I'm not trying to fix anything for anyone. I don't manipulate anything. I just observe. But what it does is it activates unique brainwave function that has been associated with the body's natural healing processes. So we always know if there's any healing going on, there are going to be these certain brainwave functions happening. And when I'm doing the work, I'm not thinking about brainwaves. It's the last thing I'd be thinking. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just simply innocently witnessing what is in front of me. But I do see things that get released, and sometimes they're little artifacts, they're images, sometimes they're little movie clips and things like that, of things that have occurred to people in the past that they maybe even have forgotten about, but and the older ones are like that when they appear that way. Those are big things that have influenced their functioning for a long time that they are not aware of. So those things begin to release, and then might share with them, this is what I observed. And I go, oh, yeah, that happened to me when I was 9 years old. Yeah, I was drowning in the ocean one time. That happened actually, one of people. A lot of different things. I mean, I've had thousands of sessions, between, individual and group as well. So I still do all that. And if you go to my website, the thomasgates.com, just go there, thomasgates.com. I have all kinds of stuff there that you can read about what this is and all that. Stuff on the book is there. The book will be coming out soon. So what I like to do when I'm doing presentations is give people a little experience of it. We don't have a lot of time, so I will do 5 minutes. Is that okay? Do 5 minutes of this session. So all you have to do is nothing. You get to sit comfortably, or if you're lying down, that's okay too. And you'll have your eyes closed, and then there's nothing, like I say, nothing for you to do. I'm just being present and observing. I do group sessions all the time, and you might feel some sensations now and then, or you might not. You might see some colors. There are these colors that happen, or you might not. You might have a lot of thoughts, or you might not. In other words, there are no expectations. Just be present, be yourself. You're not looking for anything in particular to happen. Just be present. That's all. Just relax. Okay, so you can close your eyes and take a nice, long, deep breath. And my timer. And I'll begin now. And you can take a few moments after another nice, long, deep breath. You can open your eyes when you're ready. Thank you for letting me share that with you because it's I enjoy the experience myself. I was going to say too, if you want to know more about that, since we didn't really talk about it on my website, I have a lot more information about the healing spectrums, and I do personal sessions, I have group sessions, and I have training. I teach individuals how to do self-treatment of this, as well as how to treat others. I have a professional program for healthcare professionals that I actually train. I have doctors, healthcare professionals who use this in their work. But and also more about the book. We're in the pre-launch part where we're uploading everything, and so that's coming out pretty quick here in the next, I don't know, hopefully three weeks, something like that. So if you go to the website, there is that page. Just click on the thing that's the book uh, image there, and there's a little spot where you can click on that and you can subscribe to the newsletter that has to do with all this, as well as keep you update on the book and things like that. And also, I have a free session program too that I do on Wednesdays in the morning. In the evening, I have that. They're just short, 15-minute, but and coherence activation, I call it as well. So that's a thing you can also sign up for too if you like. And thank you
I have
so
to
much.
ask if there was a cat walking near you, or did
Oh,
you?
yeah. Yes, she's an actual real cat. She's not the spirit cat. I will say this, when you're doing the healing spectrums thing, all the people I've trained, they all know this too, and I know it. Like when you're doing that, if you have a pet, they want to be next to you while you're doing that because they pick up on that coherence and they really like it. They'll get on your lap and just kind of, they look like they're asleep, but they're just like in that space. They help you.
Wonderful.
And so this has been really delightful. I'm sorry, like it's amazing that it happened, right? With
Yes,
all the challenges of like, let's get this thing up. Oh my gosh.
a lot of challenges today.
And like you said, there'll be people who maybe they weren't able to get on, but we'll have it up. You'll have it up on the platform there, and that'll be good because then I can share. I can tell people, hey, if you missed the talk, you can go there too. Because
Right, right.
and are we meeting at Rubies of Siam now?
Uh, a few people think occasionally meander over, but it's not a regular thing like it once was.
I know that was wonderful. I wish I was there. I would go with you and go over there.
That would be fun. Yes, indeed it would be.
Yeah, when
Um,
I get up there, I'll come back up to Chicago and do some events and things like that after the book's out.
Great. Well, let us know when you're coming. Our speaker next month might be of interest to you, Thomas, as well. Her name is Carolyn Clapper. She lives about 50 miles door to door from me, north in Wisconsin.
Mm.
But she's, I think, in her 40s. She had a near-death experience a few years ago, and when she came back, they left the doors open so she can see um, spirits just like she sees you and me.
Mhm, mhm.
She sees everything, and she works with 5 doctors on the other side who give healing
Right.
information to her clients.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
very interesting, and she's very talented at it. So
yeah.
it should be a great time to she spoke to us once before, and everyone loved her. So if you're free the second
Yeah.
Saturday of November, join us.
I will. And I was going to say, like, that uh, people have asked me a question quite often, like, am I able to communicate with the dead, and deceased? And I say flat out, no. But occasionally they have some information for me to pass on to the person I might be working with. And almost every time, the only reason they do that is because they want to say, if they could say the words, it's not words. It's just I know why they're there. Is they would say, I'm sorry, for anything I ever did that was hurtful to you. I was just doing the best I could, and I just hope you can forgive me. That's happened so many times. And you know, it helps people let go of things that were unresolved and oftentimes and just move on. You know, they want you to move on. They want you to be happy and let go of anything that was making you feel guilty about anything, or you could have done more. We always go through that. You could have done more. No, everything is perfect and right, and they are fine, and they, you know, there might be some troubled souls out there somewhere and everything. I haven't really run into them. They're not attracted to me. And those entities, when they know I can see them, they will run away because they can't take coherence. They thrive in chaos. So the less chaos you have in your life, the less you have to worry about that kind of stuff. I don't put any attention on those things. I'm seeing them, you know, less attention you put on them, the better. Just don't worry about it. A little last bit of advice. Wow. Okay. Well, and if anybody has any more questions beyond this, just go to the website and then you can contact me and do sign up for the newsletter there because I'll be getting more information out for you. Is that a question or no? Website is thomasgates.com. If you know my name, you can find me. thomasgates.com.
That's good. That's good. Thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Thomas. It was great to see you again and a great to bring
You
your
too.
message in through this
Oh, I see
message
Cindy was here.
today.
Cool. Yeah, hi Cindy. Well, yes, and thank you for the good work that you have continued to do. You really make a difference for people. You know, it's so important for people to have some deeper understanding of this, how we can let go of some of the fears around death. It's not it doesn't have to be a fearful thing. It's
Right.
part of the evolutionary path.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay,
Absolutely.
great.
It's
Wonderful blessings to everyone. And
Thank you
you know,
very much.
also to you.
enjoy the evolutionary journey of it's a blessing to be a human being. It truly is. I have no desire, you know, I'm not one of those people who want to get back to that. That's fine when it happens, it's fine. Been there, done that. When it's my time, I'm okay. But in the meantime, this is a great opportunity. This is where we get stuff done. This is where we grow and evolve. There's not that much to do once we get out of here, you know. So this is where we do it.
This is where
So
we learn.
embrace it. Yeah.
Yep. It's,
All right. You're welcome, Marilyn. Yeah, yeah. I see folks
here at
signing.
school.
Good. All right.
So we'll see you all next week. Don't forget to donate if you
Yeah,
have.
exactly. Yes. A
We
great
don't
service.
collect any admission fees because I feel this work is so important that it needs to be available to everyone
Yeah,
free.
for sure.
So, but and meanwhile, since we've encountered the pandemic, we don't take in enough every month to cover our monthly expenses.
Hmm.
Fortunately, uh, our guides provided a little cushion from before that it has been getting us through.
Maybe we can get some ideas of some things there. I'm gonna think about that because I definitely plan to come back up to Chicago and do some things, and maybe we can generate something going on there. The people do get together for things, but it's just a matter of like where do you do that, and we might have still some connections that could help with that.
Well,
Yeah, all right, Elizabeth, thank you. Thank you for being here. And she's thanking you too.
thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next month with Carolyn Clapper.
Cool. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
You.
Blessings.
Thank you.